This week's episode was sponsored by Hannah over on Patreon, who has the best initials of anybody I've ever seen, and I'm really excited that I get to add them to my wall. So why don't I do that now? Smoke! And there it is. Thank you so much, Hag, aka Hannah. I really appreciate your sponsorship. Even if you made me do the thing that I'm about to do now. When I asked Hannah if there was anything she wanted me to shout out special with her sponsorship, she said yes. And, well, I figure if I just read exactly what's here, I won't be implicated in any crimes that may be occurring. So let me just find her message. Okay. So this is from Hannah. I want to make that perfectly clear to any cops and or CIA agents who may be watching. In your sponsorship, could you mention that I wish to have my mother's skull after her death? She has given me consent for this, I promise. I will keep it upon my mantle, and during parties, everyone will have to pour out a little bit for her. And if my children don't do the same for me, they will not receive my copious fortune. Hag then goes on to ask, could you please say something very rude about my mother? So, hey Hag's mother, fuck you. I'm sorry. This is probably a very inappropriate segue for this, but this week's episode is also sponsored by a business, which I'm really excited about, so why don't I tell you guys about it now? Yeah! Hey guys, Willie here, and if you know me, then you know that for my own safety, I should probably just not be allowed on the internet. I have accidentally doxed myself more times than I can count. All of my passwords are just password 69, and one time, I gave someone my PIN number because they asked me nicely and I didn't want to seem rude. Also, I'm realizing now that I just gave everyone my passwords, so that's probably not great either. Clearly, when it comes to protecting myself online, I need all the help I can get, which is why I love Atlas VPN. With just one subscription, Atlas VPN allows me to protect all my devices while enjoying lightning fast speeds, and as if that weren't enough, it also blocks all those malicious links, ads, and trackers that you deal with while surfing the web, notifies you when someone is trying to steal your identity, and it even helps you find the best deals while shopping online. Atlas VPN is the best deal on the VPN market, and it's about to get even better because if you use my link in the description below, you can get it for 82% off, which, well, I don't know why you wouldn't take me up on that offer. It's basically free at that point. And right now, some of you might be saying, I don't need to protect my data, I'm invincible, and to you I say that I don't like your cocky tone, but even if you do want to put yourself at risk like that, you should still use Atlas VPN, because it has a lot of other fun perks too. One of my favorite features is that it lets you unlock the full potential of your streaming services by allowing you to change the location of your server to another country. Streaming services like Netflix, Amazon Prime, and Hulu offer different content depending on where in the world you're located, but with Atlas VPN, if the country you're in doesn't have what you want to watch, you can just say that you're in France, and maybe they do have what you're looking for, so that's pretty cool. And it doesn't stop at streaming services, you know. Sometimes I just like to relax with a glass of wine at the end of the night and see what YouTube ads look like in Serbia, and Atlas VPN allows me to do that too. For those curious, they're very stern. Like I said, you can get Atlas VPN for 82% off by clicking my link in the description below. So sign up now because, well, I can tell you from personal experience that you face more threats on the internet than you realize. And it's better to do it than not do it and wish that you had. Also, speaking of facing threats on the internet, if everyone could just go ahead and forget the password that I told you, that would help me out a lot. That's right, mofos. Willie went corporate. I hope you like my ad read sweater. And now that I'm super successful, I just want to say one thing, which is that I will not be remembering the names of any of you who helped me along the way. So please know that you're all dead to me. But yeah, with that out of the way, let's start the show. Hello, nitwits, and welcome to yet another episode of Knitting Time with Willie, the show where you get to spend time with me, Willie, while I knitting. I'm your host, Willie Muse, joined as always by my co-host, Nitcolis. And you guys, I'm starting to realize that I'm not very good at this. As you can see, I'm wearing my skeleton sweater, which means that it's time for yet another episode of my ongoing series, Hey, this thing is popular. Maybe if I make a video about it, the algorithm will promote me and I will become popular too. Normally I'd explain what the series is all about here, but I honestly feel like that title already sums it up pretty well. Actually, no, I will explain it a little more because according to my stats, not a lot of you have watched any of the videos from the series, so clearly an introduction is in order. Basically, I'm trying to grow my channel like the idiot that I am, and in order to do that, I've decided to occasionally dedicate videos to topics that are popular with the algorithm in hopes that they get promoted so that I get more popular. And yeah, like I said, guys, I'm not very good at this. I genuinely think that the two videos that I previously made for this series might be my two favorite things that I've ever made, period. I spent a lot of hours working on them and put my heart and soul into them, and after all that time and effort, I was genuinely proud of how they turned out, which is not something I can always say about the stuff that I make. Of course, then I released them, and they both bombed. My last video in particular is on track to becoming my least viewed video since, well, people started viewing my videos, and seeing as I made it for the express purpose of trying to get more views, I can't say that it doesn't sting a little bit. Still, while a smarter person than I might take this as a sign that my instincts are bad and I should ignore them and instead focus my energies on the kind of subject matter that I know does well for me, I have decided to instead dig my feet in and spend yet another couple weeks of my life working on a video that might very well bomb on the slim chance that my weird meta approach to growing my channel actually works and I end up getting more views because of it. Of course, in order for me to do this, I needed to come up with an idea for a popular topic that the algorithm might like, and as I was brainstorming, I was reminded of something I said in my previous video when I was talking about how popular true crime is. Like, honestly, I feel like the only things that even come close are like talking about how much you hate Shane Dawson and boobs. So I made a 3-hour video about titties, but as I was putting together the thumbnail, something about it felt tawdry somehow, so I scrapped that one and decided to make a video about Shane Dawson instead. Because, truth told, videos about Shane Dawson are probably the exact kind of content I should be making if I want to get more views. People seem to like my videos best when I'm reacting to problematic media from at least 5 years ago, and in that regard, Shane Dawson is a goddamn goldmine. Not only that, but I feel like the point of these videos I'm making is to try and get more views on YouTube, and if that is my goal, then I feel like Shane probably has a lot to teach me. I mean, say what you will about him, but the dude is kinda the undisputed king of this stupid garbage fire hell site. He's managed to maintain a level of popularity and longevity that would have seemed unimaginable back in 2008, where, as I only get a small fraction of his total views, and even when I do have a video that does slightly better than average, I'm very rarely able to carry that popularity I gained into my next video, much less keep it going for the better part of a decade. So clearly, he knows something that I don't. With that in mind, I figured that if I dissect a piece of his content in the obsessive way that I normally do when I make these stupid videos, then maybe I can learn a few lessons that will help me grow my channel and make videos that more people on here will want to watch. Although before I go talking about Shane Dawson's content, I feel like I should tell you guys a little bit about my thoughts on Shane Dawson himself, because I feel like that will color the way a lot of you guys view this video. he's a very polarizing figure, and I feel like when someone clicks onto a video about him, it's either because they love him and want to see him celebrated, or they hate him and they want to see him torn to shreds. I feel like a lot of your guys' enjoyment of this video will depend on where I fall on that love-hate spectrum, so I feel like I should probably tell you. And when I thought about it, I came to the conclusion that, well, I'm somewhere in the middle. I guess if I had to choose a side, I'd say that I'm probably closer to hate, because, well, I definitely don't think that I love him. Still, despite what I said in my earlier video, I don't think that I hate him either. Not because I think that he's secretly great or anything like that, but more because hating him feels like a lot more energy than I should be wasting on someone like Shane Dawson. Hating him to me would kind of be like if I hated a dog toy, if that makes sense. Like, some things are just so not meant for me that it's hard for me to muster any amount of emotional response to them at all. And hell, even if I was someone who was super into dog toys for whatever reason, I still feel like it would be pretty hard to hate one. Like, I feel like it would be hard to look at one and think anything besides, like, yep, that's a bone that's stuffed and it squeaks when you squeeze it. There's really not a lot to it. Which I guess makes it sound like I'm saying that Shane Dawson is too boring for me to hate, but I actually don't think that that's the case at all, because I am genuinely fascinated by him. Every piece of content of his that I've seen has drawn me in a way that I can't fully explain, and is probably not the way that Shane intended, but I do find it riveting nonetheless. Shane Dawson to me is kind of like the internet version of that time that an artist took a urinal and put it in an art gallery and then it became an incredibly famous piece of art. Like, the context with which it was presented and all the people who were made to view it created a lot of interesting and important discourse, but I don't think that any of that discourse has anything to do with the original intended purpose of the thing itself. Really, it's just a very mundane thing that on its own wouldn't be all that interesting. And this unfortunately brings me to a little hiccup in my plan, because I am unfortunately not the first person to realize that making a video about Shane Dawson is a good way to make myself more popular on YouTube. Truth told, I'm probably not even the 600,000th and first. I am currently covering very well-trodden ground, which means that all of the really notable pieces of Shane Dawson content have already been dissected ad nauseum by many other creators who are not me, and many of whom are much, much better at this stuff than I am. As much as I'd love to talk about Smiley Face or his 9/11 conspiracy theories, I feel like it would be hard for me to do that and still bring anything new to the table. Also, he took his 9/11 conspiracy theory videos down, which is very disappointing for me because I have never wanted to watch anything more in my life. In making my video, I didn't want to talk about anything that was too overdone, and because Shane's popularity is so immense, that kind of meant that I had to go searching a little bit. That said, though, I'm lazy, so I went about searching in the easiest way I could think of. Basically, I sorted Shane's videos by popularity and went to the bottom of the page, thinking that that would be where all of the videos that weren't talked about would live. Doing this led me to a charming little piece of content called Testing Dumb School Hacks with Alicia Marie, and so that's what I'm going to talk about today. It seemed like it would be a pretty good example of your run-of-the-mill piece of Shane Dawson content, and I feel very confident that it's probably not one of the more discussed entries in his oeuvre, because, well, if we're being honest, there's not really that much to discuss here. It's a pretty straightforward video. And now that I know what I'm going to be talking about, let's get to talking about it, to see if I can learn anything about how to become popular on YouTube from the master. Let's press play.
How's it, guys?
Okay, I'm going to stop it right there for a couple of reasons. The first of which is that I just want to point out that I don't think that the sentence he just said has any vowels in it.
How's it, guys?
Beyond that, though, I think I've already seen a number of ways in which Shane has me beat as a YouTuber, the most obvious of which being that he knows how to frame a shot. Or at the very least, he has put some amount of effort into the ultimate appearance of his videos, which, well, if we're being honest, I wouldn't even know where to begin there. I'm still focused on making sure that none of my equipment falls down during filming. I then regrouped and typed in motherfucker. I'm gonna get there one day. Say what you will about him, but it's clear from just the first few seconds of this video that Shane has a very good grasp on what he's doing. I feel very confident in saying that the guy knows what his viewers are sitting down for, and he has made sure to jam as much of that Shaney goodness into every goddamn second of this thing. Like, I super didn't think I'd be using this term when making a video about Shane Dawson, but the mise-en-scène here is pretty well thought out. For starters, I'm assuming that Shane has a lot of options in his house for places to film, so the fact that he appears to be at his kitchen table definitely feels like a choice, and that choice helps strengthen what I think is meant to be the tone of this video. The fact that it's at his kitchen table makes you feel like you're actually getting a glimpse into his home in a way that does make the video feel a lot more personal than it might have if he had just filmed it on some kind of set. Like, it kind of does make you feel like you're just sitting at a table with your friend over a glass of wine, just like gabbing over dumb back-to-school hacks. As you do. And it's not just the setting that makes this video feel personal, it's the set too. I don't know if they were conscious choices or if Shane is just naturally very Shaney. But everything on the counter behind him does a lot to help contribute to the vibe that I think this video is going for. For starters, you have what appears to be a cereal dispenser, which I think serves two purposes here, the first of which is that it makes the kitchen feel that much more lived in. Since the goal of the kitchen is primarily to feed oneself, having a device that one could use to help achieve that goal makes this feel that much more like we're looking at Shane's actual kitchen. Granted, I do think that we are looking at Shane's actual kitchen, but still this makes it feel like we are too. If that makes sense. Also, since cereal is a youthful sort of food, the dispenser serves the purpose of making Shane seem young and fun. By his own admission, Shane is a lot older than the audience he appeals to, and so a cereal dispenser kinda helps to put him more on their level. It shows the kids in his audience that he's just like them. He may be older, but he'd still be right there alongside of them on the front lines, just trying to murder the Lucky Charms leprechaun, or whatever it is that cereal eaters do. I don't know, I'm old. Next to the dispenser, you have a cup that says Dog Dad, and two mugs which use their handles to spell out the words cunt and dick respectively, and I feel like if you were to ask me to give you a visual representation of Shane's sense of humor, I could not do better than just this shot right here, because I feel like it pretty much sums it up. And then finishing out what's on the counter, you have a print of an old advertisement and what appears to be some sort of ceramic shillelagh, both of which I imagine were purchased in the home goods section of a Target. And then sandwiched in between those are what I can only assume are the leftover bottles of alcohol from a bachelorette party. And all of this stuff comes together to paint what feels like a pretty accurate picture of the vibe that Shane seems to be going for here, all before he even says a single word. Or at least before he says a word that's not just garbled gibberish. Of course, this is all in the background, because the real focus of this video is Shane himself, and just in case that wasn't clear, the camera work does what it can to make it as obvious as possible for anyone watching. The footage is shot in that way, you know, where the thing at the center of the shot is really clear, and then everything behind it is kind of blurry, and it just kind of serves to highlight the thing that you're trying to draw focus to. I'm not entirely sure what the technique is called, but it looks very nice. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there's a solid chance that this is just what it looks like to be in focus, and I've just never figured out how to do that. I'm not good at this. Whatever the case may be, though, it serves its purpose, which is putting Shane front and center. When you come to a Shane Dawson video, you're doing it to see Shane Dawson, and so it makes sense that you'd want to visually highlight him in every way that you could. I'm going to keep a running tab of the lessons I learn along the way while breaking down this video, and based on all that stuff I just talked about, I feel like the first thing I could learn is that presentation matters. Granted, I feel like I already do put a lot of thought into my presentation. I'm just really, really bad at doing anything that's required in order to make it better. But still, it's an important thing to keep in mind, so I'll write it down. I feel like if you're trying to appeal to new people, you have to show them up front what you're trying to give them and that you're capable of giving it, and Shane's video does just that. I think it's very clear from the first few seconds what kind of video this is meant to be, and regardless of whether or not you like that video, it's hard to deny that it follows through on the promises that it makes. Meanwhile, with my videos, I feel like if you're not coming in already on board for what's going on, it might take you a second to be like, wait, is this a commentary channel or the extended cut of that video from The Ring? I feel like if I were able to make things feel a little bit cleaner up front and establish myself as something that's worth your time as quickly as possible, more people would give me a chance and less people would exit out immediately out of fear that if they watched the whole thing, they'd get a call saying that they're going to die in 7 days. Which, speaking of doing things as quickly as possible, I am only 11 seconds into this video, and seeing as it's 15 minutes long, I should probably keep things moving by watching more of it, so next clip.
Yes, the life hacks are back. I know, you've been scared, you've been hackless. Life has been so much harder without my hacks. You guys are like, no, life's been great. Now I know a lot of you guys are going to school soon. I'm not because I'm old.
Okay, so that is the first full sentence of the video that didn't sound like someone was clearing their throat, and right away I think I got another lesson because, well, this video is incredibly dense apparently. The words in between those exaggerated facial expressions and fake laughs imply something really important about this video, and that's that Shane really fucking does not want to be making this video. I guess you probably could have figured this one out by the title alone, but he does not have that much of an investment in the subject matter here. At the time of making this, he would have been 28 years old, and despite a couple of thumbnails I saw to the contrary, I do not believe that he has any children, so I feel like he probably doesn't personally give two shits about back-to-school hacks. I mean, maybe he does, but if that's the case, then it's very odd. I think that the much more likely explanation, though, is that he's making this video because he knows that his audience will like it. Like I said, his audience at this point seems to be predominantly younger women, so they probably would be interested in the subject matter at hand because, unlike Shane, they actually might be going back to school. It also kind of sounds from the way that he talks about it in the intro that life hacks were a thing that he did a lot when he was making this video, and a lot of people really liked them. If I had to guess, based on what I know about how YouTube works, he got a lot of comments saying, when are we going to get our next life hacks video? And so he gave the people what they wanted, and he catered it to their interests, and thus the thing that I'm watching right now was born. And so I guess that the lesson to take away from this would be to play to your audience, which, well, it's honestly a very good lesson. It's something that Shane Dawson is genuinely quite skilled at, and based on the way my views fluctuate from video to video, it's also something that I could stand to do a little bit better. I think that if Shane Dawson does have one undeniable strength as a content creator, it's that he knows what his audience wants. I've seen more clips of Shane Dawson than I care to admit, and there are a lot of times when he talks about his audience in an extremely myopic way that I find, genuinely fascinating. One instance in particular sticks out in my mind, which was from one of his many apology videos where he was talking about his history of blackface, and one of the things he said was that his audience wasn't offended by it, so he figured that it was okay. Which is a very weird thing to say about blackface when you actually stop to think about it, but I think in Shane's mind, it made perfect sense. The way he talks sometimes, it makes me feel like Shane Dawson exists in this weird feedback loop where he focuses only on what people who like him like, and then he gives it to them in order for them to say that they like it, and then he looks at this new round of people saying what they like and creates content based on that, and so on and so forth until he ends up buying a mansion. And if this is actually his process, then it seems to be working out pretty well for him, which isn't all that surprising, honestly, because he seems to be genuinely very good at it. If I had to give my best guess at why Shane Dawson has survived for so much longer than all of his contemporaries, I'd say that it's because he has a genuine skill for figuring out what people want to see and giving it to them. Like, I think that's why his series of documentaries were so incredibly successful, because, well, no offense to him, but it certainly wasn't because of the filmmaking. His instincts were strong enough that he knew where to point his camera in order to find a compelling subject matter that a lot of people would be interested in. And so while I definitely wouldn't describe him as this generation's Errol Morris, I do get why so many people responded so strongly to those videos. Like, I honestly wouldn't even be surprised if somewhere down the line another filmmaker took his footage from his time with Jeffree Star or Jake Paul and used it as a basis for another documentary that is actually well regarded, because I do think that Shane Dawson actually did manage to capture some genuinely fascinating moments in time. He just catered the way he presented it to his audience, and so that made it not as good as maybe it could have been. And maybe this is giving Shane more credit than he deserves, but I feel like that might be part of the reason why there are so many assholes like myself who are willing to jump online and criticize his content. He's clearly spent a lot of his career making stuff for teenagers, and no offense to teenagers, but the things that they like are often terrible. A lot of his content feels less like he's making stuff that he likes and more like he just likes getting a good response for the things that he makes, and he's just trying to chase that response however he can. I also get the sense that after years and years of doing this stuff, he's gotten so good at getting that response that it's become second nature to him. And as a result, there are a lot of times when the stuff that he does or says feels oddly mechanical. I feel like a good example of what I'm talking about here is his first attempt at a joke in this video, which, against my better judgment, I'm going to show you now.
I'm not, because I'm old. I'm literally old enough to not only be your teacher, I'm old enough to be your old teacher. Like the one whose balls you can see because they're so low. You know, the teacher who you're like, why is there marbles in your pocket? Oh, yeah, that's me.
And like, look, before I talk about whatever that was, I do want to say up front that nothing makes me madder than watching people talk about how something's not funny. It's something I see on here a lot, and it pisses me off every time. Like, for one thing, it's an extremely easy thing to do. Comedy is a social medium, so if anyone expresses their distaste for a joke, it's going to make people around them that much more likely to not enjoy said joke, because it's much harder to laugh alone than it is to laugh along with everyone else. Like, truly the only thing that you need to do to make a joke seem not funny is to laugh ironically or repeat it back in a stupid voice. There are 7 dirty words you can't say on television. Doing shit like this makes people stop and think like, wait, is this thing that I'm laughing at stupid? And more often than not, the answer they'll come to is yes, because it's a joke, and jokes are generally all stupid if you think about them too much. Which is not to say that I don't generally agree with a lot of people on here when they say that jokes are bad. I just don't know what they're getting from saying stuff like that. I feel like there's nothing wrong with discussing the content of a joke or pointing out why maybe it's not something you should be laughing at, but when all you're doing is trying to prove that a joke is unfunny and bad, then best case scenario, all you're doing is robbing people of joy, which, like, I don't know why you'd waste your time doing that. And this is all to say that nothing I'm about to say is meant to critique Shane's abilities as a comedian or to say that you're wrong if you found the thing he just said funny. But Well, that said, I have not been able to stop thinking about that combination of words that just left his mouth since I first heard it about a week ago, and so for my own personal sanity, I feel like I have no choice but to discuss it in depth with all of you watching now. If I were to try and break down this joke into its most basic elements, I'd say that there are 3 types of humor at play here, all of which are an essential part of any piece of Shane Dawson content. The first of these is self-deprecation. He starts the joke off by talking about how old and decrepit he is, and this is the sort of thing that Shane does a lot, which, I get it. I would be lying if I said that I didn't also enjoy making a self-deprecating joke here and there because, well, they're fun, and I have a lot to work with. That said, though, I do feel like Shane makes fun of himself in a way that's a little bit perplexing at times. I don't know whether he's being disingenuous or is just blinded by his own insecurities, but he sometimes self-deprecates in a way that doesn't really match up with how I feel like most people might view him, and so rather than feeling like a self-deprecating joke, it feels more confusing than anything, or in extreme cases, it even feels like he's making fun of other people more than he's making fun of himself. I feel like a good example of this is I've seen him make a lot of jokes about his own weight, and I do know that he struggles with his weight, so I don't want to say that he can't, especially if humor is an outlet for him in that regard, but I do feel like I've seen times where the extent to which he's made fun of himself, combined with the size of his platform, makes me think there are probably a lot of people who are a lot larger than him watching his videos thinking, wow, if that's what he thinks about himself, then just imagine what he must think of me. As far as this joke I'm talking about right now is concerned, well, like I said, he was 28 when this video was filmed, so while I do get the impulse to feel like a saggy bald old man when you compare yourself to a bunch of teenagers, I don't think that it really makes sense as a way for him to mock himself in this particular instance. I feel like by literally anyone's metric, 28 is pretty young. Even if I was a teenager, I think I'd consider a 28-year-old teacher more of a cool, young authority figure rather than the geriatric ghoul that Shane seems to be trying to paint himself as here. I feel like for self-deprecating humor to make sense, it has to be catered to oneself because, well, it's right there in the name. I feel like if I were to try and make fun of myself by saying that I look like Jabba the Hutt, I feel like that wouldn't land very hard because, well, I don't think I'm that big, all things considered, and even if I were, Jabba the Hutt is a very broad thing to compare yourself to, so I don't think that it would seem like I'm personally attacking myself. If, however, I were to say that I look like the kid that none of the other Hitler youths wanted to play with because he's bad at sports, then I think that would be a pretty good self-own because, well, my haircut and I am bad at sports, so it does kind of sting a little bit. And I don't doubt that he is actually a very naturally self-deprecating person, but I also do feel like this is kind of part of his shtick. I get the sense that he employs so much self-deprecating humor in his videos because it's a good way to make himself feel more approachable to his audience. I think by highlighting his own perceived flaws, he's kind of saying look at me, I'm just a normal guy like all of you, which I think would make him a lot more appealing to a lot of the people he seems to be gearing his content towards. And this brings me to the second type of humor at play in this joke, which is relatable comedy. Relatable comedy is more or less the lifeblood of the internet, and so it would make sense that Shane would employ it as much as possible, especially because I feel like a huge goal of everything that he makes is to try and be relatable. Like I said, comedy is a social medium, so framing a joke as something we all experience is a really effective way to get people interested. Just like how all it takes to make a joke seem not funny is to say that it's not funny, by framing a joke as something relatable, you're basically telling whoever's listening, hey, I'm already laughing at this thing, so you can join me. The way that Shane employs relatability here is by prefacing his joke with, you all know the guy, implying that what he's describing is a shared experience among everyone. And I feel like by framing the joke in this way, it's going to make it so that a lot of people will be like, yeah, I do know the guy, and then they're going to laugh because of it. Hell, I feel like there are a lot of people who are going to laugh at something like this even if they don't know someone like that, because since it's framed as a thing that everyone has experienced, people are going to want to feel like they're in on the joke. I feel like a lot of relatable comedy forces people into a corner where they have to laugh because otherwise they'll feel like some sort of freak on the edges of society, and nobody wants that. Well, I guess that Shrek wanted that, but even he eventually learned the power of friendship, so... Lest you forget, the relatable thing that Shane is describing here is, of course, a gross old teacher whose testicles have started to sag at the age of 28. And this brings me to the third kind of humor at play here, and that is shock comedy. A lot of comedy is about saying things that aren't expected, and so just bringing up scatological or offensive stuff can be a really, really easy way to make people laugh, because normally that sort of stuff is not supposed to be said in most situations. And like, just in case you don't believe me, tits. I feel like shock comedy is probably the medium that Shane works in the most. Like, if I had to guess, I'd say that Shane's origin story was probably that two older boys on the playground wouldn't let him play the penis game, where you go back and forth seeing who can yell the word penis the loudest, and then feeling spurned by being left out, Shane vowed there and then, like, I'm gonna scream penis louder than anyone has ever screamed. Mark my words. And weirdly enough, I feel like it's because he says such dirty stuff that a younger audience is so drawn to him. Like, I can totally imagine my younger self wanting to watch videos aimed at me where the person hosting was saying extremely dirty shit, because the fact that they weren't censoring themselves on my behalf would make me feel very mature and adult, which is kind of what you want when you're younger. Like, Shane Dawson kind of reminds me of this t-shirt I saw on a boardwalk when I was younger, where there's a fish giving a guy a blowjob, and it says, "The Happy Fisherman." And I just remember thinking that that was the most sophisticated, grown-up thing I had ever seen, because, like, clearly it wasn't meant for children, so it must have been meant for adults. I kind of just assumed that that must be what adults were wearing when I wasn't around. It was only after I actually became an adult that I realized, like, no, it's not. I'm not entirely sure who that shirt was meant for. And I'm no prude. I love old men's testicles as much as the next guys, so I definitely wasn't offended by the joke or anything like that. I mean, granted, it was a little weird to include a description of an adult's genitals in a joke that you have expressly stated is aimed at a younger audience, but that said, I was a kid once too, and based on that experience, I feel pretty confident that this is not the dirtiest thing that most kids watching Shane's channel right now have ever heard in their life, so I'm not about to clutch my pearls over it. Still, there was something about this joke that just didn't sit right with me, and I think that's why I kept thinking about it to the point that I dedicated 3 pages of my script single-spaced to trying to better understand it. And after struggling with it for more time than I care to admit, I think I figured out what about it is getting under my skin. Ultimately, I think it's the description of the testicles. Shane equates the old man's balls to being like 2 marbles, and while I completely understand the comparison he's trying to make, the more that I think about it, the more I realize that there are just a lot of things about that description that are like just kind of off, you know? For starters, your pockets tend to hang on the side of your leg, and while I'm sure there are probably some exceptions, I feel like most of the time, testicles don't do that. I've seen the outline of things in people's pockets before, and I've seen the outline of people's testicles before, and while I guess I could be wrong, I feel like generally it's pretty easy to know which is which. Even if it wasn't, though, I feel like Shane's choice of analogy would still be off, because I think that the premise of the joke relies on the idea that the ancient 28-year-old in question has large, dangling testicles, so to compare them to marbles kinda contradicts the intended goal of the analogy. Like, don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with how big or small anyone's testicles are, but I feel like marble-sized ones would generally be considered to be on the smaller end of the spectrum, and so I feel like those probably aren't the ones that Shane meant to evoke here. And once you start pulling at this thread, a lot of the joke starts to unravel, because the conceit of comparing large pendulous balls to marbles doesn't really make sense. Framing it in a relatable way doesn't super make sense either, because it's a lot harder to be like, yes, we do all know this thing, when the thing in question isn't actually a thing that exists in the real world. Then pulling back the layers even further, this also makes it that much harder to buy the joke as self-deprecation, because I feel like self-deprecation requires a certain amount of accuracy in order to truly land. This entire joke is framed as a way for Shane to make fun of himself, but because he's making fun of himself by comparing himself to a person that doesn't really exist, it ultimately ends up feeling just a little bit hollow. Also, I cannot stress this enough, but this entire joke hinges on the fact that Shane is trying to make fun of himself for being old and decrepit at the age of 28, so honestly, I feel like I could have saved myself a lot of time and just stopped it right there for the reason why this doesn't work. And yeah, now that I've said my piece, I'm gonna make you guys watch that joke back in its entirety and let you judge for yourself if you feel the same way about it that I do.
I'm not, because I'm old. I'm literally old enough to not only be your teacher, I'm old enough to be your old teacher. Like the one whose balls you can see because they're so low. You know, the teacher who you're like, why is there marbles in your pocket? Oh, yeah, that's me.
I don't want to go so far as to say that the joke doesn't make sense, because I think that it does for the most part. I think most people watching know what Shane is going for and have had similar enough experiences to fill in whatever blanks needed to be filled. What I would say, though, is that this joke kinda exists in whatever the humor equivalent of the uncanny valley is. It's just kinda wrong in a way that you can't super put your finger on, unless you spend way too much time wasting your life trying to break it down, as I have just done. My hunch is that Shane knows how his videos work well enough to know that a joke goes there, and then he knows his brand well enough to know that that joke should be self-deprecating, relatable, and shocking, and so he put all that through his little mind blender, and this is what plopped out. And this is kinda what I mean when I say that sometimes his stuff comes off feeling mechanical. It sometimes feels like Shane treats the stuff he makes as more of a product than anything, which I think is fine, but as a result, it can sometimes leave it feeling like it's just come off of an assembly line. And honestly, I think that this is more of a Willie problem than a Shane problem. I don't think that Shane thought nearly as much about that joke as I have just done. He just needed it to serve its purpose in the video, and in that sense, it's definitely a success. I can't tell you whether Shane himself believes this to be something half-assed he rattled off, or if he believes it to be the funniest thing that anyone has ever said, but what I do know is that he doesn't seem to be questioning it either way. He sells it as though it is absolute gold, complete with funny noises and commedia dell'arte style faces.
Oh.
And I feel like Shane isn't the only person who's not questioning it. Well, there are no doubt a lot of people who probably thought, wow, that was a terrible joke. I think there were just as many people who either laughed or accepted it as part of a larger video and just moved on. And my guess is that those people are the exact audience that Shane's trying to appeal to, so ultimately I do think that the joke was a success. It did exactly what it needed to do. I didn't think going into this that I would learn a valuable lesson from Shane Dawson's old man scrotum joke, but after talking about it for so long, I actually think I did, and that's that good enough is good enough. I spend so much more time than I should stressing over exactly how to word things or making sure that the words I'm saying make sense, and honestly, I feel like I should try to learn how to stop doing that. And that's not to say that I'm going to stop trying or anything, but I have spent literal hours of my life trying to figure out how to start a sentence without saying however, because I already used however 2 sentences earlier, and I don't want to use it again. The more I think about it, the more I feel like that's probably not a good use of my time. I feel like maybe I just need to learn that the little stuff like that doesn't really matter because, well, Shane Dawson is one of the most popular YouTubers of all time. It's clearly possible to be successful without sweating every small detail. Odds are, if something works, it works. The only time anyone is ever going to spend any amount of time dissecting your words to the extent that I worry people might dissect my words is when you're big enough that a bunch of other people have already made it clear that they like the things that you're saying and don't really care about those tiny little details. When I waste my time overthinking every little thing that I do, the only thing that accomplishes is wasting time, and so I should probably try to learn how to accept that sometimes good enough is good enough. Which, speaking of wasting time and overthinking things, I am currently only 27 seconds into a video that is 15 minutes long, so I should probably speed things up a little bit. After the testicles joke, Shane introduces the premise of the video, which is basically that he's going to come up with a bunch of back-to-school hacks and then test them out. The way he talks about it, this was something that a lot of people were doing at the time, and so to make sure no one accuses him of stealing ideas, he has this strange little one-sided argument with himself in an effort to preempt the commenters.
Now really quick, before we get into the life hacks, I know what you're thinking, Shane. Are you coming for all the back-to-school YouTubers who are killing it right now? No, I'm not coming for them. I am coming to their house, breaking in, and using their schoolroom. So I texted Alicia Marie and I said, hey queen, I'm coming over and I'm stealing your set.
And I assume that this was mostly meant as a transition that would allow him to introduce his collaborator, but watching it, I think I did realize one of Shane Dawson's main strengths, and that's that he has a very conversational tone. I don't know if I can call this a lesson because I don't know if it's something that I can emulate, but I think that the goal of this type of content is ultimately to make the viewer feel like they're having a conversation with a friend, and I feel like you genuinely do get that from Shane Dawson. Watching him talk, there's very little dead space, and he oftentimes even responds to himself in places where people would normally speak if this were an actual conversation and not a video.
Life has been so much harder without my hacks. You guys are like, nope, life's been great.
The sense that I get from the way that he talks here is that he's the kind of person who tends to talk at you a lot. I can't say this for sure, but I feel like it's probably kind of hard to get a word in edgewise with him, and so I imagine that an actual conversation with him is not all that different from watching him just kind of talk at the camera in one of his videos. And I think this video kind of proves my assumption, because like I said, there is a collaborator here whose name is Alicia Marie, and I'm not entirely sure who she is, but I don't really think that it matters because Shane doesn't really let her say that much. She's just kind of there. And this leads me to my next lesson on how to become a successful YouTuber, which is collaborate. I'm relatively new to being a YouTuber, but I've been adjacent to this space for a while, and in that time I've learned over and over again that without question, the best way to grow your audience is to collaborate with someone who already has an audience. I feel like I say this a lot, but generally speaking, people only like things that they already like. Overcoming the initial hurdle of trying to get people to give you a chance is extremely difficult, and one of the easiest ways to do it is to latch on to someone who already has an audience and hope that that audience will like you enough that they're willing to give you another chance even when the person that they initially came to see isn't around. It's kind of like this one time when I was at a restaurant and I really wanted fries, but the only thing on the menu that came with fries was something called currywurst, and I was like, I don't know, but I really wanted fries, so I ordered it, and then I tried it and I was like, wow, this is good. So now I know that I like currywurst, which is nice. True story. And truly, of all the lessons I've learned from the Shanester today, this is probably the one that would help me the most. But unfortunately, it's also the hardest one to implement because I don't really know a lot of famous YouTubers who would be willing to collaborate with me. The only famous YouTubers I know are the people from the Drawfee show, and I don't really know how I'd work one of them in to one of my videos in a way that makes sense. Although that said, I guess it's worth a try.
Hello.
Hey, Nathan, it's Willie. How are you?
I'm good, man. How are you?
Shut up for a second.
Okay.
I'm making a video about Shane Dawson, and I was wondering if I could include footage of this phone call and then say you're in the video in order to get more views.
Oh, for sure, man. Absolutely.
Cool. Do you have anything you want to say about Shane Dawson for the internet to consume?
You know, if he's helping you make a video, then that's pretty cool.
Good stuff. All right. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you soon.
No problem, bud.
Bye.
Bye.
Any of you clicking into this video because you saw Nathan's name in the title are probably very disappointed that that was the extent of his involvement with it, but I contend that that phone call is as much of a legitimate collaboration as anything that Shane does with Alicia Marie in this video, because, like I said, she doesn't really do that much here. Based on the way Shane talks about her, and the fact that she has a fake classroom complete with functioning lockers in her home, my guess is that she was probably the big name in back-to-school hacks at the time, and so Shane sought her out in an attempt to poach some of her viewers. I feel like once Shane had confirmation that her name was going to be in the title of his video, she had already served her purpose to him, and so for the majority of the video, she mostly just serves as a sounding board for Shane's antics. If Shane's ultimate goal is to attract some of Alicia Marie's audience, as I suspect it was, then I actually think he goes about it in a very smart way. Like I said, one of the greatest tools in Shane Dawson's arsenal is relatability, and so in order to relate to Alicia Marie's fans, he shows everyone watching in no uncertain terms that he is also a fan of Alicia Marie. After introducing her, the video switches to a more cinema verite style where Shane documents his experience in Alicia Marie's classroom home, and well, he lays it on pretty thick.
Guys, oh my god, I'm at Alicia Marie's house and I'm about to walk into her fake school and I can't. Oh my.
He's basically just walking into a coworker's home right now, so I feel pretty confident that he is not actually as excited as he's making himself seem in that video because, well, nobody has ever been as excited as he is making himself seem in that video. With the introduction of his guest, Shane has effectively made it through all of the setup in the video, allowing him to finally start testing the dumb school hacks like he said he would in the title. The rest of the video basically just flips back and forth between Shane's kitchen, where he explains a school hack that he came up with, and Alicia Marie's fake classroom, where he shows her the hack while she pretends to laugh her ass off. And watching as Shane demonstrated his hacks to what ultimately amounted to an audience of millions of people, I learned what I think was the final lesson I took away from this video, and that was, fuck it. I'm gonna say something that I feel like I've been tiptoeing around for a while now, and that's that I don't think that Shane put a lot of thought into the actual content of this video. And I don't mean that to sound mean, because I do think that he probably put a lot of work into making this video, but well, I feel like there's a reason that most of the lessons I learned here came from the part of the video where he was setting everything up. More than anything, this whole exercise feels like a tool for Shane to promote himself. Like I said earlier, I don't feel like this video was made out of some great desire to create a video about back-to-school hacks. I feel like odds are that his schedule said he needed to come out with something, and he did the math on what would do well and what his audience would like, and he called up one of his famous friends to join him, and that was where most of his efforts went. And because of that, the actual meat of it feels like more of an afterthought than anything else. When it comes time to do the hacks, Shane seems like he kind of just said, fuck it. Like, for one thing, what he does here aren't even really hacks. What transpires is more like 15 minutes of Carrot Top-esque prop comedy, but done in a way that makes you realize that there's an art to what Carrot Top does. Which, like, for the record, under normal circumstances, I would be fine with this. I think that joke school hacks is a pretty good idea for a video, and I feel like someone could do it in a way that's actually really funny. Where I have a problem with this video in particular, though, is the fact that Shane doesn't really seem to be all that interested in following through on the good premise that he gave himself. Just like that joke of his I overanalyzed earlier, everything he does here feels less like an attempt at humor and more like an attempt to push his own brand under the guise of jokes. And to show you what I mean, I will go over a few of his hacks, starting with the first one he shows us, which is his version of a promposal.
Now, I've seen a lot of pictures out there where kids like make creative signs asking girls to go to prom. And they're cute, like sometimes they use candy bars or stickers. Sometimes they personalize it with like pictures. But you know what I have not seen? The one thing that would probably work best. That's right. How could a girl say no when you give her a prom sign made out of Target gift cards? Bitch, even I would say yes.
I don't like that I'm like this, but I have spent an alarming amount of time trying to comprehend that clip because I genuinely don't know what the intention was there. Like, I'm not even joking. Trying to wrap my head around whatever Shane was going for gave me what I'm pretty sure was my first migraine ever. And what's worse is that it's confusing in a way where you don't even realize that it's confusing. This is the first hack he shows us in the video, so the first time I watched it, it didn't even really faze me because I had not yet been made to believe that all of these hacks were meant to be read as funny, so I kind of just thought like, yeah, that's a legitimate, if extremely expensive idea for a promposal. That said, based solely on Shane's reaction, I really don't think that this is meant to be sincere because, like, I may not be great at reading other people's emotions, but I do feel very confident in saying that this means funny. Although that said, why it would be considered funny is genuinely perplexing to me in a way that may or may not have kept me up last night. And again, I do not want to diminish anyone's joy, because if you found it funny, then I do genuinely believe that it was funny, and nothing I say should take away from that. But, well, that said, if you do get it, could you please explain it to me, because I genuinely don't. Like, if we were to break this down as a joke, then I would say that the setup is the mere fact that he's doing a promposal. It's a recognizable thing that everyone watching will have a certain set of expectations for, and so Shane's goal here should be to create a way of promposing that will subvert our expectations in some way, either by being over the top or unexpected or even just so bad that it's stupid, but to my eyes he does none of those things. He just does a fairly normal promposal and then laughs his ass off about it. I've thought through a lot of possibilities of what his intentions are here, and none of them fully sit well with me. Like, my first thought was that maybe he's saying giving a potential date what appears to be $1,000 in gift cards is an insanely lavish thing for a high schooler to do, but if that's the case, then it feels weird, because if you're trying to highlight the lavishness of it, then Target is a weird choice because, well, it's not what you think of when you think of lavish. Clearly, Target is part of what Shane thinks is funny here, and while that didn't really clear things up for me right away, it did make me realize something, which is that Shane Dawson talks about chain stores a lot. I'm not enough of an expert on the subject to say that he mentions Target specifically all the time, but I do feel like I've noticed many instances when he's made a point of saying like, oh my god, I love insert big national chain that you'd find at your local strip mall here. And while realizing that doesn't make me understand why this hack is supposed to be funny any more than I already did, I do think that it may have made me understand Shane's intentions a little better. And like I said earlier, it's all about pushing his brand. Target does seem to check 2 of the 3 boxes for what it takes to make a great Shane Dawson joke that I talked about earlier. And the first of these is that it's relatable. Like, literally everybody has been to a Target at some point. They're affordable and everywhere, and everyone loves them. Except for the stores that they put out of business, but that's a topic for another video. Talking about your love of Target is kind of like talking about your love of pizza. Odds are pretty good that whoever you're talking to is going to agree, so as far as relatable humor goes, Target is a great place to start, and I feel like Shane knows that. Given the way that he talks about places like Target sometimes, I do also get the sense that even though everyone in the whole wide world loves a target, Shane thinks it's funny that he likes Target. Like, I know that he came from much more humble beginnings than where he's at now, and I always kind of get a hint of internalized classism when he talks about some of the things that he loves, and because of that, I feel like this joke might also be taken as an attempt at self-deprecation as well. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if the reason that Shane is laughing his ass off here is because the idea that someone like him would love Target so much that his ideal gift is a Target gift card is silly because, well, he's Shane Dawson. With all that said, I feel like my best attempt at explaining this joke is that the punchline here is that Shane likes Target. Which again, I don't personally find particularly funny, but I do feel like if you are a Shane Dawson fan, then you might be a little bit more on board. Like, I feel like watching this hack might be akin to, like, watching Homer Simpson eat a donut or something like that. I feel like his main concern with most of what he does revolves around giving the people what they want. Everything he does feels like a carefully calculated plan to play into the persona that he has built for himself, which, honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, might be the best explanation for his jokes that there is. Like I talked about earlier, your basic joke consists of setting up expectations and then subverting them in some way, but Shane's goal seems to be meeting expectations. Like, in a lot of ways, he's all set up and no punchline. Most of what Shane does in this video feels like someone trying to think about what would make for good Shane Dawson content, and as long as that one box is checked, everything else is kind of incidental. Like, I feel like a good example of what I'm talking about is this hack he does later on, which is, well, it's a choice.
Now this next hack is a backpack hack, and you're gonna think it's crazy, but hear me out. I made a backpack out of a baby. Now let me explain. Think about it. You're running late. You don't want to get in trouble. Bitch, if you're carrying this, people will just think you're a single working mother. And they'll be like, oh, she is a baby. It's okay.
I'll give him this, and that's that this one is a much clearer joke than the gift cards. I mean, granted, it relies heavily on you finding single teen moms hilarious, but I digress. What doesn't really work, in my opinion, is the actual execution, because, like, in no world would that function as a backpack. It's just a baby doll on some straps, and no textbook on earth would actually fit inside of that little rectangular hole that Shane cut into the back of its head. Like I said earlier, the third and most frequent type of humor that Shane employs is shock comedy, so, like, I think that he does probably find single teen moms hilarious, and that was really all that mattered to him here. He doesn't care if what he's doing makes sense, he just wants the opportunity to work in that great zinger about how easy teen moms have it in high school, apparently. I also think that he knew anything involving a baby is going to be inherently shocking, so anything that he might do with it will be very on brand for him. Like, I don't know this for sure, but if I were a betting man, I would put every dollar I have on Shane being the kind of person that refers to himself as twisted all the time.
Now, not only does the baby backpack get you out of being late, but we also are going to customize her and give her some back-to-school necessities. Now, I've seen a lot of YouTubers like turning an EOS into a pencil sharpener, which is like pretty cute, but I was thinking we would stab a hole in my baby's eye and put a sharpener in there. That way, when you sharpen your pencil, it looks like you're digging into your baby's brain.
And, like, say what you will about the morality of the teen pregnancy joke, but at least there was, like, purpose to it. With the whole pencil sharpener gag, Shane flat out says that the only reason he's doing it is because he thinks it's funny to put sharp objects into a baby's eye hole.
Oh my God. I'm sorry, honey. It'll be over soon. Let me just scramble those brains.
And I will be perfectly honest, I'm an idiot, so I also think that there's a lot of fun to be had by taking a drill to a baby doll, but I feel like Shane doesn't really take full advantage of the setup that he's given himself. Like, this is the most boring version of drilling a baby doll's eye out I could possibly imagine, and Believe me when I tell you, I've imagined a lot of versions. As with everything I've talked about in this video, I might be fully wrong here, but I would not be surprised if the beginning and end of the thought put into this portion of the video was Shane saying, like, how funny would it be if I drilled a hole into a baby's eye? And then he said, fuck it, and he bought a doll and a drill and was like, let's do this thing. And as much as it tears me up inside, it clearly worked because based on the comments, people clearly enjoyed this video and laughed and then probably forgot about it and went on with their life. Honestly, I feel confident in saying of the 7 million plus people who were ever aware of this video's existence, nobody, including Shane Dawson, has ever thought about it as much as I have today. It has more views and a wider reach than anything I could ever imagine, and even so, the stakes for it are incredibly low. And that being the case, I feel like fuck it might be the best lesson I could possibly learn today. For as much as I want to make something good that people like, there is something kind of freeing about remembering that nobody is thinking about this shit as much as I am. Whatever stress or pressure I feel in trying to make something that people like is mostly in my head because you can half-assedly drill a hole in a baby doll's head and still find your audience. There's a bunch more stuff in this video that I could show you, but I feel like that would only lead to me repeating myself over and over again, and I just end up sounding like even more of an old curmudgeon than I already do, so I don't want to do that. That said, before I move on, I do want to show you guys one last hack, not because it has anything to do with what I'm talking about currently, more just because it was baffling and I need someone else to see it so that I know that it wasn't a dream.
Okay, so this next hack is for when somebody always borrows your pen, but they never give it back to you. And then when they do give it back to you, there's like boogers and blood and like hair on it. That's why you should never let me borrow your pens. So I had the idea of covering your pen with magnets. Ugh, as if I needed more ways to get me closer to the fridge. Okay, so here we go. Let's see if this works. That's everything.
Like, that's hands. He's just invented a less effective version of hands. I don't know how that magnet is doing anything that just closing his fingers wouldn't have accomplished a lot faster. But yeah, that's the video, and weirdly enough, I actually do feel like I did learn a lot more valuable lessons from it than I was expecting when I initially set out to start studying it. Still, for as unexpectedly helpful as this whole exercise turned out to be, I can't help but feeling like I left it with more questions than answers, and of those questions, I feel like the most pressing one is, why? I feel like it's hard to talk about Shane Dawson without questioning his place in the world in a variety of different ways, you know? Why is he so popular? How did he manage to stay so popular for so long? Why is he still with his boyfriend, even though there's a level of low-key hostility between them every time they interact? And I feel like these questions become all the more baffling when you think about the fact that, on the surface, there really doesn't seem to be that much to him. I said at the beginning of this video that I don't think he's boring, and I still think that's the case, but what I will say about him is that he's incredibly normcore. I feel like I have met 1,000 Shane Dawsons in my life, so the idea that there are so many people who felt the need to turn to the internet in order to actively seek one out is very weird to me. I've pondered it many times before in my life, and I've never really been able to explain away the mystery of Shane, but that said, now that I've spent so much time thinking about him and his content in order to make this video, I do feel like I might be closer to an answer than ever before. Before I can try to answer why he's popular and how he stayed popular, though, I feel like I need to answer how he became popular in the first place, because I think the reason there is a little bit more straightforward. For one thing, he started young. He started uploading videos when he was 19 years old and was an extremely early adopter of the platform, meaning that he was on YouTube before the market became oversaturated and he had a much easier time standing out because of it. He also looked like this in 2008, and while it may be very difficult to believe now, that was at one time a huge plus when it came to becoming popular on the internet. More than anything, though, I feel like it's because he was so regular that he managed to catch on. Like I said earlier, that I feel like the point of this sort of content is to make you feel like you're hanging out with a friend. And I really do think that Shane Dawson feels like the kind of friend a lot of us had in high school. He's cool, but not too cool. He's handsome, but not so handsome that there's no world where he'd ever talk to you. He's edgy in a way that feels rebellious, but not so edgy that you'd worry he might sell you drugs. I'm sure in my younger, dumber days, I would have totally wanted a friend like him. Of course, a friend like him probably wouldn't have wanted a friend like me, and that's why I totally understand why someone would watch his content. It kind of makes you feel like you have the cool high school friend of your dreams. Based on a very quick read of his Wikipedia page, he started uploading in March of 2008, and perhaps unsurprisingly, it only took him until September of that same year to get his first hit, a charming little romp called Fred is Dead. Both in the interest of being thorough and also a little bit out of morbid curiosity, I watched a re-upload of Fred is Dead, and what struck me about it is just how many of the basic tenets of Shane Dawson are already at play here. The basic premise of the piece is that Shane realizes he'll never have as many subscribers as the then very popular YouTuber Fred, and so because of that, he decides to instead kidnap and murder Fred. He then starts to play Fred by binding his hands and digitally altering his voice so it's high and annoying like Fred's was.
Maybe my mom tied me up. Last time my mom tied me up, it was because she wanted some alone time. Mommy time. Usually when she says mommy time, she's in the bathroom for 3 hours with the door locked and the radio on. But I think the radio's broken because all I hear is bzzz. I think I just farted. Sometimes my farts smell like peanut butter.
And yeah, most of the video is him saying annoying shit like that before his beloved blackface character Shanae comes and shoots Fred dead. Though the premise might be very different, what's weird about watching Fred is Dead is that it ultimately doesn't feel all that different from the Hacks video. And I think that the reason for that is that at the end of the day, both of them only exist for one single purpose. And that purpose is to just let Shane be Shane. Like I said earlier, when you come to a Shane Dawson video, you're doing it to see Shane Dawson. And so whether he's kidnapping a famous YouTuber or testing back to school hacks, it doesn't really matter so long as Shane is the one doing it. And yeah, with that in mind, I feel like the reason he's so popular is because he found a platform that allowed him to connect with a lot of people, and he managed to make a lot of those people like him. Which, now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm realizing that that's a very obvious answer to why someone might be popular, so I'm just going to move on to trying to answer how he managed to stay so popular, and hopefully that'll be more interesting. And honestly, I think that my best guess for why he's managed to stay so popular for so long is, well, he really wanted it. I think the closest I've ever come to understanding Shane Dawson came when I watched the first part of Fred is Dead.
Hey you guys, Shane Dawson here. So I was doing a little browsing on YouTube the other day, and I saw that one of the most subscribed people of all time was this kid Fred. Fred is basically this kid who talks in a high-pitched voice and says random things about medication and his mom and stuff. And I thought, he has so many hundreds of thousands of subscribers, there's no way I'm going to be able to top him. So, the only other thing to do is to get rid of him.
Right from the get-go, he had his eyes on the prize. I don't think that he actually wanted to kill Fred, but the fact that the thought crossed his mind solely because the guy had more subscribers than him does feel a little bit telling. At the end of the day, I feel like the secret to Shane's success is that he spent his whole life doing the things that I've been trying to do in this video. He looks at what's popular and does what he can to learn from it. Of course, that said, there is one major difference between him and me, and that's that unlike me, he is actually very good at this stuff. I said something earlier in the video that feels a lot more important now that I think about it, because really, if I were trying to figure out the best way I would explain the secret to Shane's success, it would be this. The way he talks sometimes, it makes me feel like Shane Dawson exists in this weird feedback loop where he focuses only on what people who like him like, and then he gives it to them in order for them to say that they like it, and then he looks at this new round of people saying what they like and creates content based on that, and So on and so forth until he ends up buying a mansion. In writing this video, I spent a lot of time trying to think of another person to compare him to, just to try and give my brain some sort of touchstone to try and better comprehend him. But he's such a singular figure that I honestly couldn't do it. And really, the more I think about it, the more I feel like the reason I found it so difficult was that what I'd compare him to isn't a person at all, but rather a thing. And that thing is an algorithm. Shane looks at the world around him and takes in information and tailors his output to that information, and he does it all in the pursuit of one singular goal, and that goal is to be as popular as he can. And while I know that comparing a living human being to an algorithm might sound like a bit of a stretch, I don't even think that what I'm saying is all that hyperbolic. Like, when he was left to his own devices for long enough, Shane literally started to promote conspiracy theories. If that's not an algorithm, then I do not know what is. And honestly, looking at him through this lens does explain a lot about him. It explains why he's lasted so long, because he's constantly adapting to make sure that he keeps up with the times. It explains why his content can sometimes feel mechanical, because, well, it is. And it also explains a lot of his more problematic tendencies, because, well, I feel like I couldn't make a video about Shane Dawson without discussing some of his more problematic tendencies. I mean, mostly because my videos do 10 times better when I put the word problematic in the thumbnail, but still, I do think it's important to touch on nonetheless. Because for all of the shocking and edgy humor that Shane injects into his videos, I don't think that any of his most problematic moments were intentional. For as dark and twisted as he seems to think he is for drilling into a baby doll's eye, I think that the most problematic moment of the video comes from another hack.
Okay, so I've seen a lot of hack videos where girls are trying to like hide their tampons and pads and different things in their backpack. So then I started thinking, if I was a girl, what would I take to the bathroom? And then I figured it out. Food. Oh my god.
Like, I don't think that this is his worst offense by a mile, but to see him as a cisgendered male teach the many young people in his audience that their tampons are shameful and they need to be hidden is kind of fucked up in a lot of ways. And to his credit, I don't think that Shane was being intentionally malicious here. Like, he even says that it was inspired by other people who did similar hacks. But my guess is that those people he was inspired by were people who got periods, responding to actual societal shame that they had to endure. Shane takes his ideas, and rather than applying critical thinking or any amount of depth to it, he just looks at it and thinks, what can I do with this that would appeal to the most amount of people possible? And because he's catering his ideas to the same society that created shame around periods to begin with, all he ends up doing is perpetuating the shame. What follows is a weird sort of passive misogyny that I don't think Shane even realizes is offensive, because it's not that far off from a lot of the weird shitty ways that society as a whole treats periods.
This is actually kind of genius. Like, hey girl, you want a Cheeto? Oh, I'm not hungry. Yeah, but you've been a bitch to me all day, so I think you need a Cheeto. Wait, what? They're tampons! I know you're on your period.
Like, he's less being offensive and more mirroring offensive aspects of society and claiming it as a joke. And this is true for a lot of the controversial things that Shane does. Even what is arguably his most problematic creation, his black woman character Shanae, feels almost too stupid and shallow to be offensive. Almost. It is still remarkably offensive.
My name is Shanae, and Shane Dawson sent me here to do him and all his fans a motherfucking favor.
Are you gonna take me home?
Do you live in hell?
No.
Well, that's where your chipmunk ass is going.
There is no part of that clip right there that leads me to believe that Shane Dawson has ever met or even seen a black woman before in his life. She is the most tired, reheated regurgitation of a character I have ever seen in my life, and I feel very confident that Shane put absolutely no first-hand observations or even original thought into her creation. More than anything, it feels like an amalgamation of a lot of the shitty, reductive ways that black women are treated and portrayed in society. Like, I feel like it's successful for the same reason that it's offensive, and that's because societal views on black women are terrible. Shane's myopic pursuit of approval on the internet has slowly morphed him into this personification of a lot of what's wrong with internet culture. He's a weird funhouse mirror of the everyman, you know? He's normcore, but he's normcore in a way that reminds a lot of us that the norm needs to be drastically improved upon. Which is sad because I feel like it didn't have to be this way. One thing I wondered a lot while making this video is who would Shane Dawson be if he didn't have the internet? If he didn't have this outlet that allowed him to build himself up, would he still be a huge star? And God help me, but I actually do think that he might still be successful if he were born 20 years earlier, because I honestly do feel like there's a lot of real talent there. It's just being channeled in the wrong direction. I've tried to be as diplomatic as possible throughout, but I feel pretty okay saying that Fred is dead is, well, it's just awful. Truly, it is one of the worst things I've ever seen in my life. It's 3 minutes long, and I struggle to make it to the end. That said, though, it's bad in a way that a lot of things people made when they were younger are bad. It also demonstrates a fair bit of natural filmmaking ability, and if you told me that the person who made it went on to direct something genuinely good after allowing themselves to grow as an artist, I would totally believe you. I think under normal circumstances, it would be the sort of thing that someone looked back on after a few years and felt a little bit embarrassed by. Instead, it went viral, and I think that Shane kind of learned the wrong lessons because of it. I mean, I'm sure he wouldn't see it that way because it did lead to him being quite successful, but for me, who doesn't get to enjoy any of his money, it does feel like an unfortunate turn of events. Like I said, I think that his ability to stay relevant throughout the years is due to his skill at following popularity, but I don't think that that skill is exclusively used in order to change with the times. Like I also said, I think that he himself is one of the main reasons that he's popular, and because of that, I feel like in a lot of ways, his pursuit of approval has led him to staying the same. I talked a lot about how everything he does feels like an effort to preserve his Shane Dawson brand, and he's been preserving that brand for so long now that I can't help but feel like it's gotten in the way of some serious growth. Like, I've spent a lot of time talking, trying to explain this guy, but really I think that the easiest way to explain him might just be that he was a talented kid who was able to get popular before he was ready, and as a result, he's remained that same kid in an effort to preserve that popularity. In a lot of ways, it's kind of ironic that the video I talked about today was all about back to school stuff, because in a lot of ways, I don't think that he ever really left high school. And with that in mind, I feel like I need to add one last lesson to my list of ways to get popular on YouTube, and that's that popularity can't be the only thing that I'm after. It's nice, but it's hollow, and if it's the only thing that I care about, then what's even the point? As much as it sucks that some of my attempts to grow my channel didn't pan out, I shouldn't dwell on it because, well, maybe my time is just gonna come when it's supposed to. And who knows? Hopefully by then I'll have figured out a way to make it so that my equipment isn't falling over anymore. But yeah, that's my video. Please like and subscribe and share and comment and subscribe to my Patreon because that really helps. Thank you again to Hag. I'm sorry your patch isn't in frame, but it will be eventually, so I hope you don't regret your decision to spend money on me. And also, I have t-shirts now. I plugged them in my last video, but not a lot of people saw them, so I will plug them again. Yeah! I have a t-shirt version of the striped sweater I wear when I do my top model videos. Yeah! I have a t-shirt version of the mayor sweater I wear when I talk about bad movies. Yeah! And of course, I have a t-shirt that says Content Warning 2006, like you'll see at the beginning of my top model videos. Yeah. Hell, you can even buy this shirt I designed when I was high one night and decided that I wanted my own name on a t-shirt. I don't know why you'd want to, but I get money off of it all the same. Yeah! So if you like what you see, then buy one, because that will also help me out. Yeah, goodbye! Hello again, it's time for everyone's favorite segment. Willie poses for a thumbnail while his patrons' names scroll down the list. And since I am posing for a thumbnail, I figured I would learn from Shane because that feels appropriate. So I'm looking at his thumbnails. He seems to like a side face. So that's good. I feel like there's this one that he uses a million times. So I feel like I'll just do that. So it's him, side, face, like that, eyes forward. I think it's like really intense, like. And he also has a yellow outline around him when he does his thumbnails for some reason. I mean, I know yellow catches your eye, so I'll probably do that too. But yeah, it's just kind of looks like the dramatic chipmunk almost. I don't know that there's a lot of variation there, but hopefully I got a good thumbnail out of it. Okay, goodbye for real.